I take as a starting point, since this is about Syria in the context of the Arab uprising, that there is something that we can call the Arab uprising in the singular, and that is something that I would describe as a long-term revolutionary process that started in 2011, December 2010, and will carry on, will go on for many, many years, and actually decades to come. So looking at the situation through that angle, and as in any revolutionary process of this kind, you have usually a line of cleavage, a line of demarcation that emerges, dividing the scene between revolution and counter-revolution, to put it in, let's say, simple terms, but true. And the issue is, how do you define this cleavage? How do you define the separation, or what is the criterion that is the essential criterion according to which you make your assessment of the various forces? I mean, historically speaking, it would be rather easy. I mean, when you take the process like the French Revolution, it's rather easy. You know where is the revolutionary camp, you know the counter-revolutionary camp locally and regionally at the European level at the very least. Now, the more we progress in history, the more the picture gets complicated with the variety of factors. In the age of imperialism, it is already more complicated, although, I mean, again, we can think of the Russian Revolution. Well, there were some people at the very beginning to tell you that this is a German plot, you know, conspiracy theory, and this should ring a bell to some of the assessment that we hear nowadays about some of the revolutions in the region. But that's precisely because those who make such assessments don't use as a criterion what a revolution consists of, that is, what it is about, what is the mass movement, what is what are the revolutionary tasks in the region that is concerned with all that. They replace that with a very simplistic criterion, you know. Whatever the US I mean, says or supports, we should support the reverse. Well, this is extremely simplistic, of course. If politics were only about, you know, just taking the opposite position of the United States, as Leon Trotsky said it about the bourgeoisie, any stupid would be a master in strategy and tactics. Doesn't take much thinking, you know, reflection to know how to position yourself. You just put a negative sign on every US position. So of course things are much more complex than that, and that's what we have to look at. I mean, if our consideration, key consideration, is the revolutionary process itself, what it means, what kind of old order, ancien regime, was prevailing in the region, and how this ancien regime is confronted by this revolutionary shockwave, which again, and let me repeat that, is only at its beginnings. So how do, you know, the various forces fit into this picture? Well, I don't think I need, after everything you've heard since this morning here, to explain why the Syrian regime is not part of the revolution, but part of the counter-revolution, and very much so. Why is it a counter-revolutionary regime facing a revolutionary uprising? I'm sure that you had enough discussion about these aspects. So now let us look at the regional counter-revolution. How does it function? And I think part of the complexity of the whole picture has been conveyed by Ella's report, or Ella's presentation. I mean, I hope you were able to follow all that, but if you weren't and you got lost at some point, don't blame yourself. It is quite confusing at some time when you look at the behavior, the positioning of various political forces involved in all that. When we look at the regional major stronghold of the counter-revolution, which is the Gulf Cooperation Council, we can see that even within this bastion of counter-revolution, you have a cleavage, you have rivalries, you have people supporting at some points, you know, different forces. And here I'm referring obviously to this cleavage that exists between the Emirate of Qatar on the one hand and the Saudi Kingdom backed by the United Arab Emirates on the other hand. You have already, you know, another degree in complexity. But basically, what they are basic at differs in the sense that wherever it was possible to support the Ancien regime, the Saudis have been heavily on the side of the Ancien regime. And it's only in situations where they were not in a position or not able to support the Ancien regime, at least openly, that they have taken different positions. I'll get back to that. The Qataris, because of, I mean, a long story, don't have time to get in details, but anyone interested can find the story in my book here. The Qataris are trying, or have been trying, to co-opt the revolutionary process from the start through their alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood. And since the Muslim Brotherhood has been, from the very beginning of this whole process, a major actor, a major regional actor, the Qataris thought that their time has come. They could, through the Muslim Brotherhood, emerge as, you know, a regional power, if you want, and that's very much what has been informing their whole political behavior in the region. And in that regard, Turkey was their ally in this business, given the fact that also Turkey had developed close links with the Muslim Brotherhood. And we could see that very, very obviously functioning in various cases, where, especially those cases where the cooptation was most obvious, but this applies, of course, to Libya, but also to Egypt, to, you know, I mean, the first phase of the revolutionary process there, and other places. And this cooptation was also in the fact that they both were the godfathers, I mean, Qatar and Turkey, of the Syrian National Council, not the coalition council, in which the Muslim Brotherhood plays the main, or is the heavyweight, if you want. It plays a main role in the sense that it's the real heavyweight of the Syrian National Council, which was the previous major spokes group or whatever for the Syrian uprising. Now the Saudis are not in this, and actually they resent very much this Qatari game play. I mean, the way the Qataris play with fire for the Saudis, in the sense that they contributed to the destabilization of the regional order. And in various respects, Qatar did indeed contribute to this destabilization. Just think of the role of Al Jazeera, which is, of course, a Qatari tool. And any analysis of the Arab uprising can't fail but underline or emphasize the role preceding this whole situation played by something like Al Jazeera. Again, I don't have time to get in details, but I hope we'll be able to do that in the discussion for anyone interested about that. So for the Saudis, it was, I mean, obviously the main choice is support the Ancien regime everywhere. And again, as I said, when it wasn't possible at all to do that for various reasons, they would try themselves also to co-opt the revolutionary process. And that's relatively easier in this revolutionary process at this stage because of the lack of strong progressive forces playing a major or central role. This allows, or this gives much more room for possibilities of cooptation by counter-revolutionary forces trying to divert the revolutionary process from any path that would be, or that would represent a danger for them. Now, in the case of Syria, the Saudis could not possibly come out openly in favor of the Assad regime. And that's because of, I would say, their own ideology. The main ideology of the Saudi monarchy, the Saudi kingdom, is Wahhabism, which is an extreme form of Islamic fundamentalism. I mean, even within Islamic fundamentalism, it's a quite extreme form. It's an ultra-fundamentalist perspective, if you wish, and very sectarian at that. Very sectarian with a discourse even about the Shia, and mind you, the Alawites are more heretics, between quote marks, from this perspective than even the Shias. But even about the Shias, the discourse of the Wahhabis is extremely sectarian, extremely violent, extremely hostile, full of hatred. And therefore, with knowing the character of the sectarian character of the Syrian regime, in the sense of the use of by the Syrian regime of the sectarian factor in Syria, the Saudis could not position themselves in support of the regime. And so the alternative to that is precisely to sectarianize the conflict, to try to co-opt it, but in the name of the fact that the Saudi kingdom sees itself as the how to say, the main or the main Sunni state, and therefore kind of guardian of Sunnism, and in that regard, therefore support the uprising from this kind of perspective. Now, this said, the Saudis and the Qataris are in the business of rivalry in Syria. The formation of the Syrian National Coalition came as part of the setback of the Qataris after the first wave of the revolutionary process, when the Qataris appeared, as you know, very much triumphant and in very strong position, along with their friends, the Muslim Brotherhood. When the tide was reversed and the problem started with the Muslim Brotherhood, they also started for Qatar, and here the Saudis went on the offensive and gaining an influential position in the present Syrian National Coalition. But all this has to be understood as for what they are, that are attempts to co-opt a revolutionary process. And that doesn't make the revolutionary process a counter-revolution by itself. It's not to say that there are not, within the revolutionary process, within the forces that are of a counter-revolutionary nature, and this, I guess, has been already discussed here, so I won't dwell on that. But, this doesn't change the central picture of the origin of this uprising, of the meaning of this uprising, of the program of those who are speaking in the name of the uprising when we compare it to the de facto program of the regime. So this is where we have to make a judgment. Now, coming to the international scene, well, the United States is, as I said, for some people, including some people, many people actually on the left, is the key obsession. Anti-imperialism replaces whatever other value you can have. Democracy, socialism, working class, whatever. All these values are superseded by anti-imperialism, and anti-imperialism understood as if only the United States were an imperialist country. Now, this whole also gets to the picture where, I mean, at the extreme, you have people believing that basically the United States is pulling the strings of most of what is happening in the region. To the point that you had views that the Egyptian revolution, and I'm speaking of the 2011 one, was actually manipulated by the United States. It's a US conspiracy. And so if some people were ready to believe that for Egypt, of course, the same and much more believe such views about Syria. And basically this is also predicated on the idea that the United States is almighty. It's not understanding the fact that the United States is at the lowest point ever of its influence in the region since the peak of the very early 90s, that is since something like a quarter century. The United States are at a very low point of their regional influence and beyond. Just ask Hamid Karzai if you have any doubt about that. The very behavior of Karzai, if you are following the news, is so ridiculous, and that it's such an insult to the US imperium to find this stooge of the United States defying Washington in the way that he is doing. And so the United States, faced with the uprising, had resorted to the view that when you can't stop it or block it, try to co-opt it. And how to co-opt it? Well, they had the offer, the Qatari offer, and the Qatari mediation, and they tried their best to do it with the Muslim Brotherhood. Basically, the US is not at all, and this is a major mistake that some people do because they are not following closely what is happening in the United States and the positioning of the United States, is not at all in the business of regime change, which was the kind of slogan of the Bush administration. This has led to the most important disaster in US imperial history. Iraq has been the most important disaster in many respects in US imperial history, if you judge it by what is at stake, which is much more important even than what was at stake in Vietnam, which is another disaster for the US empire. And the lesson drawn from that is that we should definitely not repeat what we did in Iraq, where we dismantled the local state, existing state, and we should maintain the state, keep the continuity of the state institutions, and do the changes that are necessary in order to appease the popular resentment. And this was captured in the phrase that was very much used at the beginning, from the very beginning of the uprising, is about Egypt, especially the orderly transition. And this is what is informing the action of the United States in every single situation of the situations in the region, and Syria is no exception. Libya was no exception. There's been a very long interview recently by Gilbert, who was one of the major figures in the Libyan coalition, who explains about the whole wheeling and dealing of the Western powers, especially London and Paris, London playing a major role here, with Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, and trying to get to some kind of agreement with the regime, preserving the regime. And he says very clearly, had the insurrection of Tripoli not overthrown the regime, they would have imposed on us this kind of agreement. And Syria, they have been trying to get to some kind of compromise with the regime, not at all to overthrow the regime. Hence the support for their faithful servants, Kofi Annan and then Lakhdar Brahimi, and all these mediations. Hence all this cozying up of Washington was towards Moscow, trying to convince Moscow to cooperate and exert some pressure on the Syrian regime. And hence, recently, and this fits in this whole picture, this kind of new kind of relation between Iran post Rouhani, the new president, and the shift in the Iranian political line that it represents, and attempts of the United States to get through that to some kind of compromise. And this is what, as they did in Libya, imposing on the coalition there a blueprint that provided for the continuity of the state, and of course that was shattered completely by the insurrection in Tripoli and the collapse and the total collapse of the Libyan state. Now it's a country without a state, basically, Libya. In Syria, you have the same. You can see it in the most recent program of the basis of the negotiating team in Geneva, which include a commitment to keep the state, to keep the institutions, to keep all that, and to get to some kind of coalition transitional government. Now, what will be the fate of this? And will it be the same fate as what happened in Libya? This remains to be seen, but just to mention that. And a final point on how, on this kind of anti-imperialism that regards the United States as the main criterion. This is predicated on completely obsolete view of the world, Cold War conceptions. This is a remnant of the old campism, and with the idea that Russia, is still some kind of progressive state. And this is, this is absurd to the point that when you look at what the Putin government represents, the Obama administration appears very progressive. This is a country where you have a flat tax, flat income tax of 10% or something like that. It's a paradise for capitalism in that sense. And this is, of course, a very authoritarian regime, manipulating the media, repressing the media, etc. You don't need to get into that. And of course, this is a country of monopoly capital nowadays, including in oil and gas. And if there were any possibilities in the past of discussions about the nature of the beast, there absolutely is no possible, discussion nowadays. And I don't think that anyone around is claiming that this is a worker state, or whatever you want to call it. This would be completely ridiculous. And therefore, not seeing that the Syrian regime is much more heavily backed by Russia, by the counter-revolutionary reactionary government of Russia, than whatever fake support the United States is giving to the Syrian opposition, is really to be completely blind. And where the picture gets back to, I would say, some normality and clarity is in the present support of Putin to Sisi, open support of Putin to Sisi, and the support of Sisi, or let's say the sympathies shown by Sisi. Egyptian general, to the Syrian regime. And you get here the picture. And Sisi is not, he himself, of course, in the business of co-opting or anything like that. They see some common basis for convergence with the Syrian regime, in the sense that they are now speaking the same language. And this language is the language that we are all very much accustomed to, at the very least, since 9/11/2001, the war on terror. This is the language that the Syrian regime is playing in order to try to win the sympathy of Western countries. This is, of course, the language that Putin's Russia has been using from the beginning, and this is the language that the military in Egypt are using today in order to restore fully the repressive state that existed under Mubarak. So I think now all these issues should, I hope, clarify the picture. Thank you very much.